But today I'm delighted that we've got Tim Haig, the Director of Property and Infrastructure from Shoreham Port, who is the client for this building. And obviously the clients are the most important people. And we also have second most important person, the architect, Martin Gray from ECE. And they're going to talk about the Lady Bee Enterprise Centre, which has recently won, amongst others, other awards. It's won an RIBA award. The awards programme has been pressing on despite COVID and all lockdown, all that sort of stuff. And it does celebrate the best buildings that we produce down here in Sussex. So I'm going to hand over to Martin. I'm very happy to say that, yeah, congratulations on winning your award, and we look forward to your talk.
Thanks, Paul. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. I think Tim can see it. Paul can see it. Yep. Hope everyone else can. That's great. Yeah, thanks again, Emma and Paul, for organising the talk. And it is a shame that we can't go down and have a look at the building in up close and personal, but maybe another time, I would have thought. Before I start, again, I think it'd be a good idea to introduce Tim and to give us a little brief talk about what the port is, and maybe a little brief intro into the original brief, which we got back in 2016-17. Tim, over to you.
Thanks, Martin. Hi, everyone. So I'll start by just explaining a little bit about what a trust port is, because we're a trust port, and that makes us a slightly odd type of client for Martin. So a trust port is not a private company. So we are essentially a national asset. We are regulated by the Department for Transport. We are completely self-funded. We don't get any government funding. So essentially, if we start to fail, we're probably on the list for privatization. But our main focus as a trust port is to create jobs and to drive the local economy. So for us, with a focus on bringing in cargoes that are for the southeast construction industry, that's a big focus for us. But for me, as the property director of a trust port, my role is to create as many versatile commercial units for local SMEs as we possibly can. Then the other big side to Shoreham Port is that we are an eco port. So we've had this accreditation for 8 years now, and what it means is everything that we do has to have a focus on sustainability, and that's why Lady Bee Enterprise Centre that we're talking about today was designed in a way to feature as much sustainable technology, renewable energy as it possibly could do. And it was such a success that we've used that as a template for the developments that we've done in the 3 years that followed, starting on Lady Bee Enterprise Centre. And yeah, just to conclude, as Martin asked, the brief for ECE was that we had this plot of land which had been reclaimed from the water about 15 years previously, and had a planning permission on it for a scheme which didn't particularly like when we got around to looking at it again. So what I asked Martin to do was come up with a layout which maximised the number of small SME units that we could get onto this piece of land, so that we could get as many new tenants into our tenant community as possible, and as many new assets onto our rent roll, basically, to make Shoreham Port more resilient for the future. And that was in the context of coming up with a design that reflected our industrial setting, but also the natural assets that we have around us, the water, the canal, and yeah, the setting that we're in. So hopefully that introduces it appropriately, Martin.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. That's great. Okay, I'll just start the presentation now. But as you can see, the image in front of you is one of the visuals that we produce for planning application. As Tim said, is Shoreham Port's the client, we're the architects, we're the planning consultants, we're at ECE planning as well. Main contractor was Pilbeams, and I was the sort of project lead on the scheme. But there's also some thanks for our technical team run by Craig, and also Paul was the design director, just had some input into the design process as well. So it wasn't just me. This slide really shows what a fantastic site Shoreham Port and Lady Bee was or is. And it provided a great opportunity for a development worthy of its location. The site is between Brighton and Shoreham Harbour, Shoreham Town, and is to the south of Southwick Village. To the north of the site, we've got Albion Road, we've got residential development, and to the immediate north, we've got smaller single-storey commercial units, which are let by the port as well, I believe. To the west is the marina, as you can see there, which is sort of leisure port offering really, and the car park, and we've also got a mixture of commercial and residential units further to the east. Sorry, and that includes there's a pub and the restaurant there as well that overlooks the site. So that's quite a key view for us. To the east is the River Arun, and then the entrance into the harbour, which is through these lock gates, which is a difference in level clearly from here to here, which is very busy. Further to the south, as you come across the lock gates leading you through to Southwick Beach, so this is all port land as well, and these are larger commercial units, and in the background there you can see Shoreham Tower as well. So as Tim said, we had a previous application, and this was the area where it was before. So the area of land which is reclaimed is sort of half that area there. And the original scheme was to have a sort of a single-storey barrier block here and a bit of single-storey commercial space or light industrial space really on these bits. And then we've got this kind of office block that addresses the marina. That was the original scheme, which got approval back in 2001. So as you can see, that's the arrangement of the site. We've got parking at the front, these smaller 80 square metre commercial units with I think that's up and over doors there. So that was definitely a light industrial offering. And then you've got the office space there. And this was a visual, so this is kind of very different to what we produced, obviously, but it has that, I guess it has that relationship with the eastern elevation, which is quite important, overlooking the marina. So as Tim said, the initial discussions on the feasibility were back in 2017, and the client was looking to maximise these sort of light industrial small business units and startup businesses for the site. And this was similar to HOVE Enterprise Centre, which is much further to the east of Lady Bee Centre, which is sort of an 1980s 90s development. And that HOVE Enterprise Centre provided rental space for small businesses, and it was very popular. So that was kind of the catalyst or the benchmark for what we're doing here, the same offering really. And I think it worked from a commercial and viable point of view, and was quite key to the small businesses that were attracted or are attracted to the South Coast. To take that development a bit further, the client's brief, we kind of looked at the original scheme in a bit more detail, and came up with a strategy for a quick arrangement of the site plan, how we thought it could be dealt with quicker. So the quick site arrangement plan here starts to add some key changes. So the orientation's changed, apart from obviously the building that addresses the eastern boundary. We also look to create these parking zones in between the buildings, which are kind of key for these units to work. And we all started to introduce the notion of colour and material ideas, really, and something different from the surrounding buildings. Earlier on, we started to test the building and the site with a 3D model, and it was quite clear early on that the sawtooth roof was a good key sort of feature to create that north light into the units, but also the south-facing roof profile to put the PV panels on. And that is something that was quite key to the port strategy at the time. They've got pretty much most of their buildings have PV panels applied to them. Also, most of the commercial buildings around the port were kind of A-framed buildings, which is pretty standard, with metal cladding, similar colours, and that was something that we didn't want to sort of progress much further than that. We wanted something that had a sort of new roof typology, and it was key to giving the site some individuality and some sort of a personal or a personality to the site, which sort of stood out from the rest of the existing context. So kind of one of our initial thoughts or ideas is to kind of start looking at sort of mood boards, which lets us look at sort of interesting commercial buildings that some other architects have done, looking at roof forms, the idea of a unique design that was sort of contextual cues to the area was quite important. So we've got, you know, coastal marine wildlife, fishes, scales, fish eyes. We'll get onto the sardine tins in a minute, but waves and hulls of ships. And this was sort of the creation of this mood board. And that this was always an interesting image to me. It sort of struck a chord all the time. Whenever time I looked at these mood boards, it was back to that. And it's the idea of, you know, a solid, robust, protective outer shell with something that's sort of beautiful and glistening within it. And that started to develop the sort of the concept idea. There is a strong history of fishing in the area, with the commercial boats, fishing boats and commercial boats passing the site daily. And there's a sort of fishing industry and wholesalers towards the end of the harbour. We also had sort of coastal conditions. We've got wind, tide, waves, and this kind of started to resonate with what the roof could be and create kind of some movement in what is essentially a static building. The other thing was actually crossing the harbour, crossing the lock gates was quite key. If you're there when one of those larger ships comes in, it's quite a dramatic environment. You're really close to something that is huge and something that you'd never normally be close to. And that kind of also kind of resonated with something that we could introduce into the design of the building. Obviously materials are key for most buildings, but really within a coastal setting, they have to be the right materials. So historically, a lot of the harbour buildings are predominantly brick and metal cladding. So we decided to look at a palette of materials that sort of complemented and enhanced that existing context. So the idea of the sort of obvious idea of a brick base or solid wall for that heavily trafficked areas with a lightweight cladding above kind of started to sort of inform what we were doing. We also wanted a roofing material that could act as not just a roof, but obviously a wall as well. So the sort of standing seam idea was something that we were looking at, and obviously the shingle cladding, which kind of reflects the fish scales, and the idea of sort of that marine environment was quite key, and the perfect fit for us was a zinc material. It's quite interesting reading about that materials, and there is an article which you can see in Architecture Today which goes into a lot more detail, but the sort of things that I understood and sort of got out of it was that the zinc used correctly with the correct coatings is kind of ideal for a coastal location. It's incredibly resilient to salts and other pollutants, and furthermore it's got a self-healing property which I didn't know about, so that if it's scratched, which hopefully this won't because it's at such a high level, it sort of self-heals. It also has doesn't degrade in UV light, so that should stay in theory the colour that it is. It's also quite malleable, so we used it for all the sort of junctions and details, the valleys, the gutters, the ease profiles, and it was again a useful material to use, and it kind of kept that harmony of materials, but which are all slightly different, but can be worked with the roofing contractor quite easily. In addition to that, there's obviously the aesthetics. It's an excellent it has an excellent look, has an excellent feel. Zinc is an excellent environmental credentials as well. It requires much less energy to produce than steel, copper, and aluminium due to its low melting points, and it's recyclable as well. So, and also interestingly, it has a low toxicity level. So, all the rain that comes off it will is clear rainwater runoff. So, it has a few interesting properties. Also, the site was raised about 1.2 meters above the surrounding areas, and that was done back in when it was reclaimed back in probably 2000s. So that gave us a sort of an idea that we could sort of start to protect the site. so the surrounding and the idea of a protected concrete wall was kind of inspired by sea defence, and it helps to ground the building and it helps to ground the site and provides that sort of that protective site boundary to the scheme. But there is points where you can access the site. So obviously the main entrance, which you can see behind Tim there, if you can, but also to the north, there's a lot of footfall along there. Lots of people driving, running, walking, coming from the east. So I think it was one of the port directors, the old directors, I think Tony suggested having these perforate access points up into the courtyards, and it does work quite successfully and leads you through really to I'll show you later where that leads you to, but it is quite a useful addition, which was we added in. We're also looking at North Lights, so we were kind of looking for a system that was fit for purpose, and Velfac provide a North Light system which was perfect, and it was manual or electric, so we had that opportunity to decide what we wanted to do. The super graphics is also quite key for the scheme, which we'll see later, and that's more to do with it also reflects the large signage which is around the port, but also shipping containers that come in and out of the harbour. We thought this was a kind of interesting feature to start to develop and see where we could produce it or use it on the building. So we got to a point where we were quite comfortable what we started to design, and as Tim said, there was a good relationship with Worthing Ada planners, so the planning process was fairly straightforward. There was only really one or two slight tweaks that we had to make after the pre-app, which was the sawtooth roof was quite high in relation to what was happening to the north, so we were looking to try and reduce that down within the build or within the section. But also when we got back the flood risk figures on the finished floor level, we could also bring it down, but I think it was about 150 mil down, so that was quite useful in bringing it down. But it wasn't too much; it didn't affect the scheme from our point of view, or any loss of area for inside the units. They also wanted to see that the eastern elevation here was animated and create an attractive bookend for the marina. The footfall in this area is busy. There's the marina, there's the car park, there's a pub, the restaurant that overlook the site, so it's a very visible elevation. This helped to develop the idea of the sliding doors, which we'll come on to later, which kind of acts as two things that does. They do change and move during the day, but at night they kind of sort of light up and become a lantern for that elevation. Which again, it's just these little things that we've done to try and bring that elevation to life. So if I go back one, sorry, I'll just go back if I can. Yeah. So the site arrangement is really, as I said, this finger of development with car parking between. We've got 37 parking spaces. We've got bins and cycles. We've got that protective wall that encompasses the site. And actually, there's the little, as I talk, there's a little perforate routes through here, here, and here, and here. So it kind of just provides that relationship with these northern units. So as you can see there, we've got the PVs and the north lights and how that is orientated. We also had to keep clear a couple of things. There's this space at the quayside which needs to be retained, and we've got a huge crane that comes in, if it ever does, once a year maybe, that comes in and swings round. It's quite a big unit, but it kind of pivots and twists, so it was quite a tight tracking in there. We've also got, as I said, there's actually a national cycle and public pedestrian footpath that comes down here and round and gets you from one side to the other. And on days when things are maintained, this is a temporary bridge that comes up, so we had to have an access point through here so that you would come down into the site and round here. So there's a few little constraints here, plus the constraint on the marina side. So we had to understand what that relationship was doing in terms of levels and making sure that the marina wasn't compromised. So that's the arrangement really of these 14 units, which you can see here, which are split into banks of two, and then a single-sided unit there. So originally we had them very small units. We've got party walls between. We've got up and over doors or glazed glazed openings. The scheme can work with both depending on the usage of the tenant. We had mezzanine floors in there with a double height space, toilets and a kitchenette, really simple on the ground floor, and stairs that went up to that mezzanine level, and that's continued on all those units. And then obviously the parking and that's associated with that, plus vehicle turning to get vans close to the entrances and for deliveries and pickups and the like. And then we've got bin store and cycle stores down at the bottom there, so that all works and is in the right position there. So when it came to this is an interesting point really about the cladding. So these are just the planning drawings that we produced, but this is the eastern elevation that shows the sliding doors and the simple fenestration on the first floor. But originally we had the option of gold cladding, which is but following sort of discussions with the port and the harbour master, really, who I believe is the second in command, Tim, of the whole port, what he says goes. His reasons really were that he thought that the gold cladding would distract some of the ships coming in, and there might be some sort of reflective feedback from the ship's lights that it was potentially a dangerous situation. But of course he's right, because he's the harbour master. But the idea was to change that material from gold to something else, but something that was contextually appropriate, but also was linked to the Shoreham Port. So their corporate colours are sort of greys and light blues. So we thought about using that, and it kind of worked. I think works really well. So I'm not sure what the gold will look like now, really, thinking about it. Probably a bit too blingy, really, for the port, but or for anyone really. I'll just change that. So and then that's just you can see there how that section works with the up and over doors, the double height space, and how that north light and the PV works on there. So this is our visual that we produced at the time, but just prior to construction, there was sort of an issue with the installation or the purchasing of the materials, which meant that the contractor got the order the wrong way around. So as you can see here, we've got we chose a dark kind of slate colour and a light up and over standing seam. So I think we did a quick mock-up just to try and, as a team, make the right decision on what we should do. And the decision was to revise the application and keep those materials that we'd got on order and probably delivered on site. So that was quite a key change. And actually, I think it would have been a different building really if it'd been the other way around. I think it's a better, it was an accident, but it was a better kind of solution. And something that the light zinc does, which is quite interesting, it changes colour through the day. So in the morning, if you come down, you're looking at east elevations, it is gold, although it's not gold, but it's a gold finish. And then in midday, it starts to turn and become grey. Most materials do that, but this one in particular has quite a change to it. So again, that sort of helps with the animation of that elevation, but also it's quite a reflective quality. So if you're there, you'll see that shimmer probably pretty much all day, depending on the weather. So it's quite a again, another quite a good quality of that material. On the sustainable points of view that we mentioned, it's a great location. It's really close to bus stops. The railway station link is like 2-minute walk. We're developing a green site. We also introduced parking electric charging points for the residents, so that's policy compliant and well used. So we had a bit of a tricky situation with the parking numbers. So the policy says X, and we didn't want to provide that many. We wanted to provide much less. So in the end, we sort of justified it with our green travel plan, and we produced 37 parking spaces in total. We increased the cycle spaces up to over 20, which was above policy again. We had to meet BREEAM 2014 at the time, which we did. As I said, PV panels on the roof that links into the port sustainable strategy. The north lights for that ambient light in the offices, and the north light which is openable areas for ventilation into the summer months to cool the building really. The parking strategy or the hard surface or the permeable car parking finish. It's a permeable fixture, so any surface water runoff is filtered and drained and then discharged back into the harbour, so it doesn't affect the local sewer networks at all, really. The main structure is steel frame and zinc cladding. Like I said, it's all sustainable materials that could be recycled or possibly upcycled in the future. Again, fabric first, which is what most people do, really, increasing that insulation into the building. And then we've got air source heat pumps throughout. And also we've got because of the openness of these units and the frame that works, there's opportunities to design and change the offering from the port, I guess, or if businesses grow, then they can sort of look to join units together. Again, it's just high levels of detailing and that control on the site, which helped with the air tightness of the scheme. So the main construction, really, as I said, it's a concrete slab with suspended floor for services, steel frame with ground floor beam and blockwork construction. The first floor is zinc cladding, which is applied to a Kingspan composite panel, which is then fixed back to the steel frame. Panels also fixed to the roof, which is a sort of base for the standard seam roof and the PVs on top of that. The installation of the zinc panels was quite tricky, I believe. It took a while, but the idea, we had a sample panel done, and as you can see, the panels are running parallel with the roof, but when we got on site, that panel, it wasn't that. It was completely, it was almost horizontal in a way. It's very different. So with a biro and a bit of wood, we sort of just changed it and drew a line and kind of showed that's the line it needs to be on. So I think they did about 2 square meters, and then we made the adjustment, and then they kind of just went for it. But did take a while, I think, from memory. The project was a design build contract, but as a company, we kind of looked to design every detail that was key to the design to maximize and retain that design intent. Our design and the technical team design team and the technical team worked really hard on that project to get that detail into the scheme, but also that was kind of supported by the client and the contractor, and that's kind of to limit the value engineering that could have happened with a design build contract. And this was key, I think, to the success of the building, that sort of relationship between the client, contractor, and ourselves as architects. The sliding doors. Oh, sorry, I've just pressed the wrong button. Let's get that back. There we go. And that's just a quick section of how that one of the units works, really. And some details there, but the sliding door which was a difficult task because it could have been very heavy, but we made it as light as possible. The sliding door in east elevation requires some careful attention to get the right help, to get it right, and to help to provide that animation on the eastern elevation and be able to be moved by the tenants. So there's a couple of pictures, kind of getting towards the end now, but a couple of pictures here which kind of just shows that relationship of materials and that complementary palette of materials. The blue engineering bit, which it does actually, there is a reflective quality to that. It does shine and shimmer slightly in comparison with the tiles above, or the shingles above, or the scales above. And then it's the complementing or the contrast of the sliding door with the timber battens and that sort of transparency that you'll see later on in some of the images. But that, again, that just helped to provide that animation on that eastern elevation. The building's got relationships with lots of things around the port. It's got the existing tenants, but it's also got the marine activity that happens there and the wildlife that it does surround the harbour. And just quickly, the swans you see there have been residents for years, I think, a long time. So the contractor had to build a little pontoon over here just to maintain that nesting area, and they stayed there throughout the whole build. So it was quite a feat, really, for not only for the wildlife, but for the contractors, just to make sure that they stayed there, really. And this is the east elevation. So we kind of extended out the terrace area, really. and that gives that, you know, you're standing out there for that morning coffee, morning chat to your tenants or your residents next door, looking out over the marina. It's quite a nice space, really. And actually, the again, I'm not sure if this, Tim, you might have to back me up on this, but we obviously got 14 units, but as you can see, we've got 11, 12, 14, and 15. So the 13 was taken out. I don't know if that's is that general superstition or a maritime superstition? I'm not sure.
It was Ada District Council. Really,
Oh, was
really
it?
weird. Yeah. I mean, the port is split in half. Half of the port is in Ada District Council, half in Brighton and Hove. And Ada have a general policy against permitting any Unit 13s in new developments, whereas Brighton don't. Very strange.
Yeah.
So yeah, our numbers don't work.
No, but you know, that's part of the charm, I guess. The also we've got, if you can see here, the signage on the first floor, and that was really put in for two things, really. It's a bit of solar shading to those windows, but also it keeps sort of unwanted signage off the main structure, which could have happened, really. So if you go down there today, you'll see all the signage that's fixed to those panels on both sides. Yeah, just again, it's just coming back to, you can see from the fenestration, it's limited on that first floor, and it's got that fixed large picture window, which is reminiscent of the fish eyes within the scales of the building. So it kind of comes, it's that sort of crossover from concept to reality, really, and how that was kind of quite a strong design concept that we wanted to retain. And this one again comes back to the concept again, where we've got the roof to wall profile providing that protective skin, similar to that sardine can. Whether you like that concept or not, that's kind of what's happened there. Yeah, so it's that's quite an interesting thing about that, but also that protective quality of that hull, and that's the density of it, that kind of resonates with this sort of overlap, and especially on the back there, you get that sort of quite a big scale that is over that space, but because it's a fingered development, you get that openness and narrowness and openness, and it's quite an interesting north elevation, I feel. And again, this comes back to this idea of ships in a port, and how the three buildings could, you know, has that sort of that mass and that sort of presence of these larger ships that are used and come through the port. I mean, this is a particularly photograph that I quite like, which is the sort of building silhouette, the large openings and the sort of lantern effect on the ground floor, and the sliding batten windows. The sawtooth roof profile also marks the location of the building when you approach the site from the east, and it sort of creates that distinctive identity to the buildings, which sets it apart from a lot of the other buildings that are around that area. And inside the building, you can probably just see it here from the photograph. We left it's quite exposed, steel frame, bolt connections, painted blockwork. Some of the tenants have retained that industrial feel, and actually, as I said, one of the artists uses that. It's kept it very clear, and she uses that double height space and the ambient light for her artwork, and it's perfect for her, really. Whereas you've got other tenants. There's an IT firm, I think, on the first block. They've got unopen plan office all the way along the first floor. On the ground floor, it's meeting rooms, reception, and it's to quite a high spec. So, you know, each individual unit is very different and used slightly differently, and they've got kind of carte blanche as to do what they want. So there's mezzanines on some of them. There's full floors over them. The idea was to keep it as clear as possible from the inside, so that people can put stamp their authority, or stamp their design, or stamp their company ethos to these units. And I think it's you know, the uptake was pretty quick. I think, Tim, we had quite a and funny enough, the only unit, the best one I thought, was number 15 or number 14, depending which one which is right in the corner there. And that was the last to go, wasn't it, Tim? I think.
Yeah, it was. We managed to pre-let half of the estate before Brexit had an impact on the local market and interest slowed down. And we were originally marketing them as shells because there was a real demand at that point. People wanted to take these units, take on their own project manager and create the exact product for their business that was required. Then when the market slowed down, people still wanted space, but they wanted it as a finished product. So then we brought in our own fit out contractor, a local company called Phoenix, to complete the rest of the unit internal fit outs to help us shift them faster. And that really worked well.
Yeah. I think there's quite a, as I said, there's quite a sort of diverse mix of tenants. You've got artists, you've got wind energy consultants, you've got the IT firm that I mentioned, the electric scooter office. There's a recycled steel bottle manufacturer or producer in one of the better unit, or one of the nicest units, I think. And then you've got, you know, and they all seem to sort of, there's a real sense of community there, I think, between the new tenants, but also the existing tenants that are kind of around the site. So it's kind of worked pretty well. I mean, I've got a quote here from the judge, which I thought was quite interesting. It's kind of the last bit really, which was, he said, in a sector where budget usually derives standardizations of spaces, Lady Bee bucks the trend. It shows how a collaborative, quality-driven response can raise the bar and deliver much-needed start-up units, which will provide long-term social and economic value to the area. So, you know, that's what it does really. And I think quickly the budget was 2.5 million, and the floor area is 1,313 square meters. So it was a I think we got a lot. We squeezed it as much as we could to get what you see in front of you really. I've got a few more things just to go on, and then we can, just as Paul said, we won the RIBA award. We got the Heritage Award. We got the Small Business winner. We didn't get the one at the bottom, but we were a finalist. But you can't win them all, I suppose. The other projects that we've worked on with the port. So the first one was Lady Bee, and that's just sort of provided, sort of building on that relationship with the port and providing that service to do other schemes. And we've got, so this is the HOVE Enterprise Centre that I was talking about earlier. So these are the old existing buildings, and we've kind of just we've got two sites, this one and one that's a bit further down there, and they're simple, the same internal arrangement as Lady Bee, but much simpler when it comes to materials and spaces, and still got the PVs in the roof, but it was a simpler offering for a similar tenant, I think, or maybe smaller tenants on that one. So to the front of, so this is behind Tim, if you can see Tim there, that is the dry dock port cafe. So this is we're obviously retaining the dry dock, but the existing building wasn't fit for purpose really anymore. Although we thought it was, and we were looking to try and utilize some of that existing structure, but at the last minute, and hence the design of the building really, and the heights that we've got, kind of at the last minute, it was deemed not fit for purpose, that the structural frame. So we had to take it, has come down to generate this, which is, so it's a port kitchen really on the ground and first floor on this end with external seating, and the idea is that we've got footfall throughout the day, throughout the year coming through there. We've got local businesses, and it's a kind of different offering to the other outlets that are around the site. We've retained some of the workshop area, which helps to service the dry dock, and then there's a small business unit which is access from the north side, which has a relationship with Lady Bee. We've got planning for Riverside Studios probably a month ago, I think, and this is a different offering. This is short-term leases, I think, for much smaller businesses. You've got like a two-man office, but it could be 3, it could be 4, depending on what you want. And these are all modular. The idea is for these to be modular units that are either craned in or shipped in and put onto a concrete base, and then very, very simple, but with a green roof and as much design that we can put into it for this to work on this quite a tight site. It's an interesting one to move into that sort of modular idea, and that's kind of what we're developing at the moment, Tim. I think that's
that's
where
right.
we are.
Hoping to crack on with that in January.
So that's the end of my talking, really. So it's probably a bit over the 50 minutes that I was going to do, but Paul, I guess if there's any questions.
Yeah, well, thank you both for that. That's great, a great talk. I don't know if Emma, you want to control the questions, but I'd like to kick off with one, which is really for you, Tim. I mean, obviously it's very current as an issue, but if you could, I wonder if you could say something about the sustainability strategy for the port, because obviously you've got your own wind turbines, you've got a power station, and you've got, is it the biggest PV roof in the country? It's one of the biggest, isn't it? And does all that kind of energy go back into the port individual buildings, or if you could talk a bit about the strategy for that?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, the port's got a really long history of being a power generation centre. If you know the history of the location, if you've seen some old pictures from Victorian times, early part of the last century, we had power stations along the south side of the port, coal-powered power stations, and we still have our gas-powered power station. And what we've been trying to do is incorporate as much renewable energy generation as we can into the estate. So we have our two smallish wind turbines in Southwick. Those two wind turbines, if you know this location, there's an adjacent red brick building which is the pump house, and so whenever the lock gates open and close, we lose water. We lose water from the levels in the shipping canal. So when you close the lock gates again, when a vessel has passed through, we need those pumps to bring the water level back up to where it was in the canal. So the two wind turbines that we've got, they are connected into the MPAN for that pump system. So that's just a really neat and tidy way of using renewable energy. We're also fortunate in the landscape that we've got. It's quite industrial. We've got lighting towers, we've got chimneys, so it's not a push to ask the local community to put up with another feature like that on the horizon. And then we've worked with Brighton Energy Cooperative. I think our first scheme with them was about 7 years ago now, and what we've done is we've now got 4 solar array projects across the port that they've assisted us with. So those are our general ambitions. We want to continue with those, but what Martin and his team have helped us do is design. I mean, we hadn't built anything since 1997 before we built Lady Bee Enterprise Centre, so a big gap, and we were able to have a sustainability template in Lady Bee Enterprise Centre, which included electric vehicle charging points, solar, everything down to the water saving white goods, and we've then been able to roll that out across the other developments that we've done in the last 3 years, and that's been a real draw for tenants as well, because in the Greater Brighton area there are a lot of companies who really focus on green credentials, and they want to be able to shout about the space they've decided to occupy.
Oh, great, that's really useful. Okay, I don't know if any people have got any more questions. I think Emma, you will have to control the questions.
Just a quick question for me, I suppose. Do you think at some point there may be a site, a building visit? I know, Paul, we were talking about it last week, that at some point.
Yeah, well, I think things were looking quite promising, weren't they? But with the latest COVID issues, I think it's whether we'll be able to do them this year or it might have to go into next year. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, you can't be going to see a building in the flesh, can you? So
I guess, but you can, you can walk around that. You can go down there and have a look, can't you?
Yeah,
so
you can outside.
It's quite friendly for visiting and walking past. So,
but yeah, definitely from our point of view, we'd love to do a tour. Maybe like spring next year when we're out of the winter, and
yeah, that would be great.
Well, hopefully we've got the dry dock building would be kind of complete as well. Hopefully, Tim.
Yeah.
So that could tie in quite well.
Yeah, that's practical completion end of March. But of course, you're very welcome to look around any of our projects at any time.
It's really kind. Thank you.
Thank you. Are those studios showing residential?
What, the Riverside studios?
Not sure.
Well,
No,
the ones in this image, they're not, are they?
they're all commercial units. So you've got, as you can see there, it's a mixture of single, double, and triple units that are modular. So you can see there, that's 1, 2, 3. So they're small commercial units for, you rent out 6 months lease maybe, and you can, that's what that's what they're for. It's a different offering to the other schemes that we've done, and they're the dual aspect units as well. So I think the modules, what is it 3 by 8 or something? I think as a depth.
3 by 6, yeah.
3 by 6.
It's basically a garden office that you don't have to put in your garden. Maybe if you don't have a garden.
Yeah.
For the local community.
So that's the.
So do we have any more questions, Emma?
There's none come up, no.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time, both of you. That's great talk. And yeah, we look forward to coming down and see it in the spring.
Okay.
Right.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Okay,
Thanks, Tim.
bye.
Thanks, Paul.